Who was that?
What is in your name? What am I to call you? You hold heaven and earth in your hand. You are whom I adore. Now I bow before you, lifting holy hands, giving honor and glory to your names. You deserve so much more. You are.
This is Moreh Robert B. Holman Jr.
And Moreh, Shawn Appleton.
And this is
Hebrews in Exile.
Shalom to you, my brother.
Shalom, Moreh.
We are in the season of the high holy days.
Ah, yes. Yes.
Now-
yes. Our last major one of the Hebrew calendar year.
And with that being said, I recognize that, sadly as it might be, that from a Hebraic perspective, we as Hebrew people cannot come to an agreement on when the Father's Moedims and festivals are supposed to be honored.
Yeah.
And that disturbs me greatly.
Yeah. It's an area of contention. I think you mentioned it. You said, there's two major issues that we kind of fall short on is the
I mean-
calendar and the foreigner.
I mean, the issue with these Moedims is that whether we're right on the day or wrong on the day, we're in exile, and it is still called practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's things within those Moedims that we just cannot fulfill while we're in exile.
And to lose faith and to lose confidence and to lose spirit within the framework of teaching disturbs me because the whole matter of things is to get an understanding and based on the evidence and still recognize that we're still talking about practice.
Yeah. Yep.
Whether we hit it or whether we miss it, it's not within the purview of our intent
Right.
to violate or to miss something that we should be doing. That's not intentional.
Right. Right.
It's not by thought. The season comes around and our minds focus on the event that's supposed to happen within the season. There are a lot of things within the framework of Torah and within the framework of the Most High's teachings to us that we don't have a full grasp on.
Yeah, true. Very
There
true.
are a lot of things that I don't care what Hebrew teacher you are, you don't know it all according to how it was disseminated to the prophets and how it was disseminated to our honorable teacher Moshe. 2, we have a document that is put together by a nation of people that aren't even Hebrew,
Right.
and they have deciphered and determined the order and what's supposed to be in and what's not in there. So you don't know what they left out and what they didn't put in. And even if we're reading the Hebrew or the Masoretic text, the Masoretic text is even laid out according to that dictate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we still don't know what's been left out, what's been added. So consequently, we are not going to know everything we need to know to the iota until we get into the land and we go up to Jerusalem, where the Torah of the Most High is going to be taught in its entirety and and give us understanding.
Oh, absolutely. It's something that, that is the reconciliation of where we are as a people.
And I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not making this as I'm not using this as an excuse. I'm only saying that in our minds of getting an understanding, let's understand the nature of what we're dealing with. And we're studying and we're trying our best to get the best understanding in this exile that we can. And I have to believe that the Most High is pleased with the effort.
Sure, absolutely. Because I think everything that we're doing amongst every Hebrew congregation is on, at least we're in agreement that yes, they are the Moedims. Yes, they're supposed to be observed. Yes, we do certain things in them. The only thing that we're, like you said, are off on is its timing. But again, there's, even though we can disagree, you always said what? We don't have to be disagreeable about it.
Now, we are in, according to our calendar and according to our understanding of Scripture and the ancillary books that the Romans left out, we are celebrating Sukkoth.
Yes.
Sukkoth has within it a condition in which that we are supposed to honor it, and it's a permanent regulation wherever you live, I do believe.
Yes, that's true.
With that being said, when the Most High spoke to Hebrew Israel and gave them these requirements, they were in the land.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, part of that mitzvot is that your men are supposed to show up, and this is in Devarim, I think 16, chapter number 16, verses 16 through 17,
Yep,
where it says
yep,
your men are
yep,
supposed to
yep.
show up.
Yep,
Not,
yep,
I, was gonna
yep.
say, I said throw up. show up
Show up.
3 times a year in Jerusalem, in the
Now-
place that the Most High
Now,
picked.
here's my question to you. Where is the land?
Oh, where is the land?
Yeah.
Where is it? It ain't the United States. It's over in the Middle Eastern area.
Where is the land?
In the Middle Eastern area.
Do you know what the climate is in the eastern part of the world at this time of year?
It should be a little, is it cool during that time?
No.
Or is it hot?
It's hot.
Okay.
It's warm. They're just now getting into their summer element. So, my point being is that I realize that some of us are trying to honor that mitzvot, and some of us are, some of us are not, by virtue of the fact that it may be, you may be living in a situation where you're not able to, 1. 2, you may be living somewhere where it's not conducive for you to do so by virtue of the fact that it may be too cold outside. Baby, it's cold outside. Baby, it's cold outside.
E flat, come on.
It's cold outside. Da, 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 da. When the Most High gave this instruction to Hebrew Israel, they were in the land and they were in a climate where it was conducive for them to be outside.
Sure.
There are aspects of Torah which within that, even within that mitzvot, that every day they were bringing an offering
Yes.
made by fire,
Correct.
which was an animal,
Correct.
which we can't do.
Correct. Because we don't have a Kohanim. First of all, we're not in land. Number one, you talked about that. It's in a specific place at a specific time with the Kohanim that are in place, which we don't have. And we do not have the tabernacle, and we do not have the articles of the tabernacle to even do that portion of it. So, but I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to reflect real quick. Part of that mitzvot directs us to live in a sukkah, and you're dancing around it a little bit.
No, I'm not.
No, okay. My family and our family, is living in a sukkah this week. We're sleeping out in a tent. We built one, put it in the backyard. Part of that mitzvot, and the purpose of it is for you to understand that the Most High had our ancestors live in sukkahs for however many years, 40 years, while they're in the desert, while he taught them Torah. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, while I'm in this sukkah last night, just for a week, couple of days, I'm out of my bed that's in my house, and I'm out in this tent, sleeping on futons and pillows in this thing. And I'm saying to myself, if this was anything like what our ancestors went through for 40 years, I don't know how I could have handled that, because it's not comfortable. It's not something that's, yeah, I'm probably sure they made it the best way they could, but we're talking about hundreds and thousands of people in a desert, and they're living in these tents. So the reflection for me while I'm going through Sukkoth is remembering how our ancestors lived, to say this was not a situation that was ideal. And what a joyous event or occasion it might have been to be able to matriculate into the land and get out from living in these booths for 40 some odd years, because it is not a comfortable thing to do for a whole entire week. You kind of displace yourself and you kind of out of sorts a little bit. So my mind often goes to every time I go in a futon and I lay down on those makeshift pillows that I got in there. I'm like, man, woo, how did y'all do this for 40 years straight? Had to get up in the morning, go and collect manna. The Most High fed them the whole entire time. And it's just something to just, it brings back, when you go ahead and participate and do those types of things, it brings you closer to the mitzvot so you can understand what your ancestors did and have a connection to it.
Excellent, my friend. Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, let's understand something about this mitzvot being carried out even in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And even in the land of Canaan, Israel. The sukkah is supposed to have 3 walls.
Okay.
With branches on the top so they can look up and see the Shemayim.
Yeah. The Hashemayim, yeah. The heavens. Yeah. No, yeah.
They did not have a need for a heater.
They sure didn't. No. You're right. I mean,
Because history says that the Most High for them was a fire
by night,
by night
cloud by day. Yeah.
to give them the warmth that they needed in the conditions for which that they were in.
The Most High totally sustained our people. Yeah.
In the daytime, when the sun came out and it was hot, the text said that he was a cloud for them by day, also providing for them their heating and air conditioning.
So not only did you have heating and air conditioning, you had a nice view of the Hashemayim at night. You had food to eat every single day. Didn't want for that. And your clothes didn't get tattered or withered the whole entire time there. And you're out there learning the mitzvot.
Now,
of the Most
I'm
High.
going to ask you another question because you've made this very kind of pertinent of the uncomfortability of it.
Oh, yeah.
This is me talking.
Sure.
I don't believe that our ancestors were uncomfortable at all.
You don't think they were?
No.
Okay.
And here's the reason why.
Okay.
They had every means to make themselves comfortable.
Okay.
They had the skins of the animals that they slaughtered, the fur.
Sure. Okay.
And if you pack enough whelps together, you ain't sleeping on rocks.
Sure. You're not sleeping on rocks.
And I believe, for my personal opinion is, I believe for those 40 years that they were in the desert, the wilderness, and not only then, but also when they were in Jerusalem, and they were ordered to come and make sukkahs around the temple, I believe they were comfortable because of this reason.
Okay.
Our people, Hebrew Israel, is very, very creative.
Okay. Okay. And you know what? After a certain amount of time, now granted, I agree with you. After a certain amount of time, you probably would have gotten used to it. Because we're used, like I said, I'm speaking from a standpoint of being comfortable in my own bed. You know, I got X amount of thick of foam on my bed, and then I'm going out to sleep on a mattress that's X amount of inches thick.
Yeah.
So I'm even though the ground is relatively flat in my backyard,
Yeah.
and I also have to deal with slope. The ground's not completely flat, but there's undulations in the dirt. So at the end of the day, I agree with you. They probably would have got used to it and been resourceful enough to be able to come up with something that have been in some ingenuity.
Because you don't hear any complaint. You don't hear any complaint from them in
That's true.
terms of their
comfort, yeah.
of their comfort level in this time.
Now they complained.
But they weren't complaining
about
they weren't
sleep.
complaining about that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, agreed.
And I only bring it up. I only bring this up to say to us that while we're trying to observe these mitzvot to the fullest degree that we can, we have to remember that the mitzvot aren't being carried out in their entirety anyway.
Correct. And as an adjunct to that, we are doing, in my opinion, this is me talking, we are doing what I think the intention of the mitzvot in exile is intended for. What are we doing? We're having a conversation about Sukkoth, about the things that are the activities and what our ancestors went through, which is what the Most High is drawing our attention to. And the most tantamount thing out of this whole entire dissertation, in my eyes, is who's doing the providing. The Most High is doing the providing. No one else. There's nobody in that narrative that said, oh, well, all these people got, a new pair of shoes because this nation showed up and gave them to you, or whatever. Everything was sustained by the Most High. And I think that's what the tantamount thing is that even in when you didn't have a house, and even when you were getting into the land, I still provided for you. And that's, I think, the intention of all we can do.
Right.
At the very
Right.
at its intention while we're in exile.
Yeah. Now, please don't think that I'm trying to figure out a way to weasel out of something.
Oh yeah, no, not at all.
That's not. My point is to bring clarity to an understanding, so you don't have to feel guilty because you're either not doing something or you can't do something by virtue of whatever's taking place. There are mitzvot that are very clear in their understanding and their application in life that we apply it to our lives every day. There are others that, once again, I say, have addendums attached to them where maybe you can do one part, but you can't do the other part.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to lend the idea that because of the absence of that you shouldn't.
No, correct.
You should if you can, and you should if you want to.
Yeah. I think we have clear examples in Ezra and in Nehemiah where they were outside of the land when they matriculated back into the land. That's one of the very first things that they did. It wasn't an idea or an aspect that, oh, okay, let's try to figure this thing out now that we're back into the land. They were probably practicing it while they were in exile, and now they're back into the land, they can fulfill the rest of it. And probably had good instruction, obviously, from Ezra and Nehemiah on how to conduct those.
I don't know.
You don't think so?
I don't know, because here's the problem. Remember, when we get to Nehemiah, the exiles that are returning into the land to rebuild the temple are coming out of Babylonian captivity.
Sure. Okay.
And being in Babylonian captivity, I don't know by text if they were totally able to practice
by decree.
By decree.
Okay.
One, and secondly of all, we find that when we look at Nehemiah and we get his contemporary Ezra in that text, Ezra begins to read from the Torah that they had not heard for a long time.
Okay. You know what?
I mean, because when we look at Nehemiah,
Was it Nehemiah 8? Somewhere in there?
probably somewhere in there. As a matter of fact, I was just there.
Yeah, because it said that they
In chapter number 8,
yeah.
that they all gathered with one accord in the open space, so forth and so on, and asked Ezra the Torah teacher to bring the scroll of the Torah. And Ezra brought it before the assembly, and it was the first day of the 7th month, facing the, I'm just kind of scanning through the text here. Ezra stood before on a wooden platform, verse 4, which they had made with individuals beside him. And Ezra, verse 5, Ezra opened the scroll where the people could see him because he was higher, and he lifted up his hand, bowed his head, prostrated himself, and so forth and so on. And they read from the Torah.
See, I don't necessarily maybe get the impression that we'd have to go back and look through text to see whether or not by decree of
for
the
all
land
the people in verse number 9 had been weeping when they heard the words of the Torah. That kind of lends me to suspect that they hadn't heard it for a while.
True. Do you think they might have been keeping the Shabbat then?
And then when we get down to verse number 14, said they found written in the Torah that Yahweh had ordered them through Moshe that the people of Israel were to live in Sukkoth during the feast of the 7th month.
Well, there you go.
See?
There you go. So yeah, by way of the text, and thank you for the correction. Yeah, they probably.
And the people went out and bought them and made sukkah for themselves, each one
There you go.
on the roof of his house and in their courtyards, and in the courtyards of the house of El, in the open gates by the water gate, and so forth and so on. And also they read every day from the first day until the last day in the scroll of the Torah of El, and they kept the feast for 7 days. Then on the 8th day there was a solemn assembly. So by reading Nehemiah and reading here, their duration of time, 490 years, 770s, 490 years that they were in exile. And the 490 years is connected to the 7 sevens that they did not allow the land to rest and lay fallow. They were in Babylonian captivity. But we find that as we look at the text, we have Nehemiah, which I want to say under King Cyrus, they began to go back to the land. Some of them went back to the land. Nehemiah now asked the question from those that were back in the land how things were going. That's how Nehemiah opens up the text.
Okay.
And he was told that things were in a situation that he became saddened in his heart. He goes before the king, and he had never been sad before the king before. And the king asked him what the problem is, and he said that there's some things going on in my land that I want to go take care of, and he asked for permission to go. So
wait a minute, I'm gonna throw you one. I'm gonna throw you a curveball, because we just talked about it here just last week. Because I just now thought about it. I think that the issue is a yes and no, and it depends on the period of time, and it depends on who's in power at that particular time. Because I could go across the street to John chapter number 7, where we have this dissertation about Christ, how he delays going to the Feast of Sukkoth, and they were celebrating Sukkoth on every single day. And it said somewhere in there that somewhere in the middle of Sukkoth, he got up to teach in the middle of the, went up to the tabernacle to teach in the middle of Sukkoth, and then he ended up doing something on the very last day of Sukkoth. So there's also evidence, even across the street, where our ancestors were observing it in Yerushalayim, because the Yehudians were telling him, where he was on the run from the Yehudians, and his Talmudin said, hey, listen, you need to go up to Sukkoth and deal with it. So I believe at the time it had to be under Roman rule at that particular time. So I think it's a mixed bag on when and who's in power, because we could say this: we're in exile right now. We get an opportunity to go back to the land. We know pieces of Sukkoth, and we know about it. But, at that particular time, I would look to whoever's the Mashiach at that particular time, the anointed one who's ever going to be teaching us, to give us some explanation on how to carry it out in its totality.
Yeah,
it's kind of a mixed bag, I think.
Well, no, I think Nehemiah allows us to know something.
Sure.
And the way that it's structured in chapter 8 and 9, it leads me to believe that they didn't.
Yes, in that particular instance, that they didn't over there.
They didn't.
Yeah. No, I agreed. Totally agreed.
Now, let's turn the page a minute.
Sure.
With that being said, we have a individual by the name of Esther.
Esther, okay.
We have the book of Esther. And in the book of Esther, I asked myself a question as I was looking up various texts and subject matter around Sukkoth. Esther popped up.
Really? Okay.
And Esther popped up because my question was, why do they associate the book of Esther with Sukkoth? Because if you look up, if you start doing study on Sukkoth, the book of Esther is going to pop up.
Okay.
But there is nothing in the book of Esther that talks about Sukkoth.
Right. That's why I'm looking confused over here, because the references that we have about Sukkoth is the one in John.
There's nothing in it.
Ezra, Nehemiah, and then
there's nothing in the book of Esther that speaks about Sukkoth.
Sukkoth. Okay.
So my question was, why does Esther parallel Sukkoth in the minds of the historians and the writers?
Yeah, great question. Okay.
Because Esther is associated with Purim. And the word Purim means the casting of lots.
Okay. And that deals with the casting of the lots for the two goats that are there. One's the scapegoat.
No.
Exiled? No.
Not Nestor.
Not
Nestor.
But I'm saying as a part of Sukkoth, you have to cast lots.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
So they bring the two goats in there, or the two animals in there.
Right.
One is going to be for the Azrael that's going to get let out into the desert.
Day of Atonement.
No. That's the Day of Atonement. What am I talking about?
Yeah. What
am I talking about? I'm about the Day of Atonement. That should be with the Day of Atonement then.
Yes, that's not Sukkoth.
That's not Sukkoth. Woo. See how all these are running together for me. No, you're right. You're right. That is Yom Kippur.
Yeah. Now, when you read Esther, and as I was reading Esther, the current events of the day floated into my mind.
Yeah. Okay. And what would that be?
First of all, we'll get to it. We have to understand that there is a key player in Esther, and
the antagonist?
His name
Haman?
Is Haman.
Haman, yeah.
But then there is Mordecai, for which most people, if you don't read the text, you don't know who Mordecai really is and how his role is played out in the book of Esther.
Okay.
Jumping down, I'm going to jump down because as we open the text in chapter 1, the text says, these events took place in the time of Achshavarosh.
Yes.
The Achshavarosh who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia.
Oh.
He was the king. He sat on his royal throne in Shushan, the capital. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his officials and courtiers. The army, now we know who the players are because we have the army of the Persians and the Medes, the nobles, the victuals, the officials were in attendance. So we have Persia and Media who's in attendance at this particular meeting.
Okay.
So by understanding the narrative that places Esther into this context, we have a leader who is more of the probably of the Assyrians.
Okay.
Than he's not Hebrew.
He's not Hebrew.
Okay. But one of the things that he does is he throws a banquet, and he has this wife. Let me get down to her.
Western 12. But Queen Vashti
Yes.
refused to come at the order of the king.
Yes.
Which he had sent through his officers.
And that upset him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He took counsel with his counselors to determine what he should do to his wife who has refused to honor his request to come into his presence.
Okay.
What shall I do?
Okay.
Verse number, let me see here. She disrespected her own husband by not honoring his request to come.
Okay.
So the king is very angry about this.
Okay.
There's a problem. There's a natural problem that occurs here. When the
Okay.
when the people hear that she disobeyed the king who is her husband, it would give all the women pause to also disobey their husbands.
Okay.
So he wanted to prevent this from happening. You're my wife. I ordered you to come into my presence, and you refused to come. I sent for you again. You refused to come. You're portraying before me a disobedience not only to me, the king, but also to your husband. And he takes counsel. What am I supposed to do about this? The king ordered Vashti, in verse number 17, to be brought before him, but she would not come. Moreover, the noble ladies of Persia and Media who hear of the queen's conduct will mention it to all the king's officials, which will bring about no end of disrespect and discord.
Oh, wow. That's who he's from. Wow. Wow. Come on. I need you to get to chapter 2. Because when you get to Mordecai, I need you to get to chapter 2. Come on.
If it please his majesty, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written as one of the laws of the Persians and the Medes, which are irrevocable, that Vashti is never again to be admitted in the presence of King Ahasuerus. Okay, that edit went out. That was done. Now, he sends out a what do I want to call it? He sends out a search.
Okay.
Amongst, for all, in chapter 2, verse 2, the king's servant attending him said, a search should be made for young, good-looking virgins.
Good-looking virgins. Okay.
Good-looking virgins. The king should appoint officials in all the provinces of the kingdom to gather all the young, good-looking virgins to the house for the harem.
Wow.
In Shushan, the capital.
Here comes these mitzvos. They're getting ready to jump out. Come on.
They should not put under the care of Haggai, the king's officer in charge of the women, and he should give them the cosmetics they require. Then the girl who seems best to the king should become queen instead of Vashti. This proposal pleased the king, so he acted accordingly.
Come on, 5 through 8. You're gonna nail this one.
There was in Shushan,
the capital,
a man who was a Hebrew.
Yes. Whose name?
Your text says Jew, but he's not a Jew.
Right.
He's a Hebrew. Whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, and of Benjamin.
Stop. Who is Shimei? Yeah, you go. You see him come up again? There he is. Shimei. Okay, so Shimei.
Who is Shimei?
Shimei. Let's go back to Melech David. We got to go all the way back to Melech David. When I saw him, I said, he shows up again?
Yes, he does.
So this Shimei character is Melech David is on the run from his son Avshalom. Melech David goes out of town. He gets out of town. And while he's on the run, this character, Shimei, meets him. And he starts throwing rocks at David.
Yes, remember that.
We remember that. And so David, he's pelting him at rocks. The reason why he's pelting him at rocks is because the fact that he's from the tribe, Shimei is from the tribe of Benjamin.
Yes.
And he's saying, now, Joker, your son is now after you because of all this bloodshed that you put against the house of Melech Shaul. So he's blaming him for the death of Melech Shaul. So David says, hey, listen, who is this guy that's throwing, because they were, I think it was one of his commanders had said to him, it said either Avishai or Yoav, one of the two, it says, let me go over and kill this dude because he was disrespecting the king. And we have a mitzvot that says you are not to curse the leader of your people. So they followed the mitzvot. They said, listen, let's kill this dude. And David said, listen, who is this clown? My son is coming to kill me. This dude is insignificant. You don't have to kill him. So David makes this oath, and he says, hey, listen, I'm not going to kill Shimei. But then later on, as David is on his deathbed in Kings chapter 2, he tells his son Shlomo, don't let this dude live.
Yes.
Don't let a gray hair on his head remain.
Right.
Use your wisdom.
Right.
Basically kill him.
Yes.
I made the oath not to kill him, but I didn't make that to you.
You're right. I got it. Just
so,
in text.
This is interesting that this dude comes up again because there's another mitzvah. At the end, I'm going to steal your thunder real quick. It says, Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamin. That checks out with text that's back in Shemuel. It says, he had been exiled from Yerushalayim with the captives exiled with Yekanah, the king of Yehuda, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, had carried off. 7, he had raised Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. I'm going to slow down because there's a mitzvah that's at the end of this. It says he had raised Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, because she had neither father nor mother. The girl was shapely and good looking. After her father and mother's death, Mordecai had adopted her as his own daughter. Do we not have mitzvos that says you are to take care of the widow and the orphan? He's following a mitzvot.
Well, yes.
By adopting her.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. When I saw that, I'm just like, oh, okay, here's another mitzvot that pops up. He's following what's in our text.
Yes. Now, a normal person reading this, or I thought, wait, a normal person.
I said a normal person.
A normal person. Excuse me. Let me rephrase it.
Jeez. Woo.
A person who does not know the mitzvot would not even recognize
Pick that up. Yep.
Pick that up.
Yep.
Now, Mordecai has raised her, and obviously because of her beauty, he has instructed her not to convey who she is,
right,
or where she's from.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So as we read the text on, it goes on that she appears before this king, and long story short, he finds her to be very attractive. In verse number, let's start at 8.
Okay.
When the king's order and decree were proclaimed, and many girls assembled at Shushan, the capital, under the care of Haggai, Esther too was taken into the king's house and put under the care of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. The girl pleased him and won his favor. So Esther won the favor of the caretaker of the harem, the house that keeps all the girls. So that he lost no time in giving her cosmetics, her portions of special food. 7 girls from the king's palace attended her. He also promoted her, and the girls attended her to the best place in the harem's quarters. Now, you got to understand something, that the Most High is on a mission.
Yes, that's correct.
Vashti not responding to the king's order was designed to set the Most High on a mission. Esther happens to be a Hebrew woman who is obviously, you know what, this is getting to be a routine thing. This is getting to be a routine. This is getting.
I'll let you do this by yourself. I ain't gonna be a part of this right here. You ain't gonna get me in trouble.
This is getting to be a routine thing about these Hebrew women.
They all have something in common.
They all have something in common in that they are all drop dead gorgeous. David broke a mitzvah over Bathsheba because she was drop dead gorgeous.
Yes, sir.
Now, this Assyrian, or whoever he is from amongst these Persians and Assyrians, he is in charge of the harem of the girls, and he finds Esther gorgeous to the point that he promotes her ahead of all of the other girls. Now, Esther verse 10, did not disclose her family, her people, or her family ties, because Mordecai had instructed her not to tell anyone. But Mordecai is her overseer. She's in the courthouse and in the harem house of the king, but he positions himself out in front of the courtyard in order to know how Esther was doing and what was happening to her.
Okay. So the first month.
Let's cut to the chase.
Okay.
We're going to cut to the chase.
Yeah, because, okay, I think I know where you're going. All right.
Verse 13.
Yep.
When the girl went to see the king, whatever she wanted would be given to her as she went from the harem's house to the king's palace. She would go in the evening, and on the following day she'd return to another part of the harem's house and be under the care of Sha'agaz, the king's officer in charge of the concubines. She would not go to the king again unless he was especially pleased with her and had summoned her. We get down to the point in verse number 16.
Mm-hmm.
She was brought to the king Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, Tevet, during the 7th year of his reign. The king liked Esther more than any of his wives. None of the other virgins obtained such favor and approval of him.
Whoa. You said in what month?
Gotta go back.
You said in the 10th month? So why are people saying that it's associated, this is with Sukkoth? What's in no? And then I'm making that correlation?
No. I mean, that's when I read it also, that came across my mind, and I'm going, but the 10th month is not the 7th month in which that the Sukkoth is supposed to take place.
Hold on. What calendar are you talking about? What month are you in right now on the Gregorian calendar? You're in the 10th month of the Gregorian calendar. And those celebrating Sukkoth are going to celebrate it, especially the Yehudians are going to celebrate it in the 10th month. They believe that the seventh month, okay? We got two different calendars that are working here that are overlapping.
Right.
So the Gregorian calendar says we're in the 10th month. So people can say, okay, when is the Yehudians or Jews celebrating Sukkoth? They're celebrating it in the 10th month. But that's the Gregorian calendar month.
Yes.
So I could see how somebody could say, oh, this must be during Sukkoth. Because they're not looking at it from a Hebraic standpoint. They're looking at it from a Gregorian standpoint. Because that's when the Yehudians celebrate Sukkoth, which is in the 10th month of the Gregorian calendar, which is really the 7th month of the Hebrew calendar for them. But that's off because we know that we're coming out of it.
Yes.
Okay? So
okay.
maybe that's why they're associating that.
Maybe that's it.
But then when I get down to chapter number 3, we talk about a couple different things. You got the 12th month that's in there and other things that's in there too. So I'm sorry.
So that's okay. That's good. That's good. So the king liked Esther more than any, verse 17, wives. None of the other virgins obtained his favor and approval for him. So he put the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Now, I told you the Most High is on a mission.
Mm-hmm.
So Vashti, not honoring the request of the king, is put in a position at the behest of the Most High to be disobedient to the king, which causes her now to be displaced, and this Hebrew woman to be brought in and put in her place. The king then, say 18, gave a great banquet for Esther's honor, for all the officers serving, decreed a set-apart a holiday for the providence, and distinguished and distributed gifts worthy of royal bounty. Verse 20. Esther had not yet revealed her family ties or her people, as Mordecai had ordered her, for Esther continued obeying what Mordecai had told her to do, as she had when he was raising her. On one of those occasions, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, two of the king's officers, Bigtan and Teresh, from the group in charge of the private entries, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. But Mordecai learned about it, told Esther the queen. Esther reported it to the king, crediting Mordecai. The matter was investigated, found to be true. Both of those individuals were hanged on a stake, and all this was recorded in the daily journal that was kept with the king.
Now, I did a teaching on this, and just now the Most High just brought it back to my remembrance. Go on and finish, because I need to go back to Melech Shaul one more time.
Okay.
I need to go back to Melech Shaul, and I'm going to drop down to chapter number 3 when I do it.
So now the king has been made aware of this assassination attempt that the queen has brought to his attention.
Okay.
Okay. Haman, who is the you want to probably wonder why am I laughing?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to put him in a political position.
Okay, now I know where you're getting ready to go. Okay, come on.
Haman has the spirit of a Donald Trump.
Yeah, there he is.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
He does not like the melanated people of Hebrew Israel. So now with that being the case, it kind of almost tells me that we're dealing with the Assyrians, who are not melanated people,
Okay.
to my knowledge. So, since the time of King Ahasuerus began to single out Haman, the son of Haddada, the Aggie, for advancement, eventually he gave him precedence over all his fellow officers. All the king's servants in the king's gate would kneel and bow down before Haman, because the king had so ordered. But Mordecai would not kiss the ring.
That's right. He wouldn't bow down to him. He said, no, you're not
So
my
he
king.
questioned
Yep.
Mordecai. Why do when I pass by, you don't acknowledge me, you don't kiss the ring? Why don't you obey the king's order, he says. But after they had confronted him a number of times without his paying them any attention to them, they told Haman, in order to find out whether Mordecai's explanation that he was a Hebrew would suffice to justify his behavior. Haman was furious when he saw that Mordecai was not kneeling and bowing down to him. Donald Trump gets furious when folks don't kneel and bow down to him. However, on learning what people Mordecai belonged to, it seemed to him a waste to lay hands on Mordecai alone, but rather to decide to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Hebrews, throughout the whole of Ahasuerus' kingdom. There we go. There we go. Now let's kind of walk this back in the mind of the Most High.
Okay.
The Most High knew that there was going to come about in the midst of this land that this king was over, where these Hebrews live, that he was going to advance an individual like Haman to the leadership role and give him certain authority. And with that authority, the Most High knows all things in advance. He knew that this individual here was going to do his best to demise, destroy, and kill all of the Hebrews that were in the land.
Okay.
So he sets up a situation where Vashti, she disobeys the king, gets kicked to the curb, and this beautiful Hebrew woman comes in and grabs the king's heart. Now, I'm going to cut to the chase with this. Mordecai goes and tells Esther what's going on and tells her that she needs to go and get an audience with the king.
Okay.
But she tells Mordecai, I can't just walk up in the presence of the king. I can only come to the king when he is requesting me.
Right.
Or I'm subject to be killed. But she's a bold lady.
She is.
Because she's Hebrew.
That's right.
And she knows who's on her side.
That's right. She has some good training from Mordecai.
So she tells him in verse number 8, Haman said to Achashverosh, there is a particular people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the province of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people. Put a pin in it, period.
Right. I mean, there you go.
Moreover, they don't observe the king's laws. It doesn't befit the king to tolerate them. If it please the king, have a decree written for their destruction, and I will hand over 330 tons of silver to the officials in charge of the king's affairs to deposit it in the royal treasury. The king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agag, the enemy of the Hebrews. I want to tell you, Hebrew people, and I want to tell all you melanated people, if you happen to listen to this podcast, we are up for a few days before an election for a man whose mindset is just like Haman's. And it doesn't matter what comes out of his mouth, where he spits and grins and says he likes you. He does not like you. And his whole demeanor is to bring destruction upon melanated people.
Uh-oh. Is that?
Now, he said the other day, I'm talking about Donald Trump, and I'm going a little political.
He said, I'm going to go political on you. Okay.
He said in a speech the other day that there needs to be at least one day, at least one opportunity for the police to go out there and just raise havoc. On who? On who?
Bad people.
On everybody who disagrees with him and every melanated person, now watch this, whom they believe or think is violating his decree. This is what Donald Trump said. That's a Haman.
You want to know something else about Haman? Now, this is for debate. I want to take you to Melech Shaul. Let's go back to 1 Shemuel, chapter number 15, verse 8.
Read.
1 Shemuel, chapter number 15, verse 8. All right? It says, now we're talking about Haman now. 15 and 8, it says, he took Agag, the king of Amalek, alive, but the completely destroyed people, putting them to the sword. However, Shaul and the people spared Agag. along with the best of his sheep and cattle, and even the second best, also lambs and everything that was good. Now, this is this issue where Shemuel now shows up and he says, I thought I gave you the decree from the Most High to wipe out all of these Amalekites. Why didn't you wipe them all out? Why do I hear sheep and all these other things bleeding over here? Why are we hearing all this? That's when you get down into 14. It says, but Shemuel answered, so why do I hear the bleating of sheep and cows mooing? So you read on down. They have this exchange, and you get to verse number 32. It says, then, and we're talking about Haman, right? It says, then Shemuel said, bring Agag, the king of Amalek, here to me. Agag came to him in chains and said, without a doubt, mine will be a death, Shemuel said. Just as the sword has left women childless, so will your mother be left childless among women. Then Shemuel cut Agag into pieces before Yahweh in Gilgal. Agag.
Okay.
Let's go back to Esther.
Okay.
Chapter number 3.
I'm in. Am I in? I'm in 3.
You in 3?
Yeah.
Chapter number 3.
Verse what?
Chapter number 3, we're going to go verse number 1.
Okay. Back it up to 1.
Sometime later, the king YHWH began to single out Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagi. Had Melech Shaul wiped out all the descendants of the king of Agag, you wouldn't have Haman and Esther.
Yeah. Yeah.
Had he did what the Most High told him to do,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have the book of Esther.
Yeah. Yeah. But with that being said,
Or there would have been another character. I should say that. You would have probably had the book of Esther, but not another Haman.
with that being said, the Most High was gracious and merciful unto the king
Sure.
in that he did not do that.
Sure.
Knowing in advance the Most High, because he knows all things,
What's going to happen later
knowing
on.
in advance what was going to happen later on, and going to the text, he says, I've never left myself without a witness. In other words, I've never left myself without someone to carry out the assignment that I've given.
Right. Right.
So we get here in Esther, the decree goes out, and the queen gets permission to come before the king. And I'm going to cut to the chase through all this now.
Okay.
She gets an opportunity to come before the king, and she asks the king to have a banquet. She's going to give a banquet. And she wants to invite the king and Haman to this banquet. She ain't asking nobody else. She's after the king and Haman to come to this banquet. And she's specific about it. Let me go somewhere. I'm going to go somewhere. I didn't outline this, so I'm trying to follow it through text.
So she's also doing something else that Hebrews do behaviorally? Is she's strategic
She's strategic.
in what she's getting ready to do?
Yeah, yeah.
This is a setup getting
Yeah.
ready to happen here now.
So, I'm trying to see here. Let me see. Let me go. I'm down in chapter number 4. I'm going to skip it. I'm going to skip it. Esther spoke to Haddak and gave him this message from Mordecai. All the king's officials, as well as the people, the royal promise, know that if anyone, man or woman, approaches the king in the inner courtyard without being summoned, there is just one law: he must be put to death, unless the king holds out the golden scepter for him to remain alive. And I haven't been summoned to the king. Okay, I talked about that. Upon being told what Esther had said, Mordecai asked them to give Esther this answer: don't suppose that merely because you happen to be in the royal palace, you have escaped any more than any of the other Hebrews. If you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come. If you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come to the Hebrews from a different direction. So you just said that.
Right.
But you and your father's family will perish. So Esther returns, gets the answer: go and assemble all the Hebrews to be found in Shushan and have them fast. And she calls the fast, what have you. On the third day, Esther puts on her royal robe, goes to inner court, and she goes down, and when the king saw her standing, chapter 5, verse 2, standing in the courtyard, she won his favor. She goes in and she talks to the king. She asks him, what do you want, Queen Esther? She says, I want whatever you request, up to 1/2 the kingdom, it will be given to you, Esther. If it is all right with the king, answers Esther, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Let the king said, bring Haman quickly so that Esther, what Esther has asked for can be done. And so the king and Haman came to the banquet Esther prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther, whatever you request, you will be granted it. Whatever you want, up to 1/2 the kingdom, it will be done. Then Esther answered, my request, what I want is this: if I have won the king's favor, if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I want, let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says. That day Haman went out happy in his spirits. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, he neither rose nor moved for him. Haman was infuriated with Mordecai. Nevertheless, he restrained himself and went home, summoned, talked to his wife and his sons and so forth and so on. We get down to verse number Haman, well, in verse 11, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth. Oh, his vast wealth. Who boasts about their vast wealth? See, this is a spirit. Trump has a Haman spirit. He boasts about his wealth, his many sons, and everything connected with how the king had promoted him and given them precedence over the other officials and servants of the king. Indeed, Haman added, Esther the queen let nobody into the banquet with the king that she prepared except myself. And tomorrow, too, also, I am invited by her together with the king. Yet none of this does me any good at all as long as I keep seeing Mordecai, the Hebrew, remaining seated at the gate. That night, the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the records of the daily journal. Wait, whoa, let me take my time. At Zeresh, his wife, at this, Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him, have a gallows 7 feet high constructed, and in the morning speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on it. Then go in and enjoy yourself with the king at the banquet. Haman liked the idea, so he had the gallows made. That night the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the records of the daily journal brought, and they were read to the king. It was found written that Mordecai had told about Begathanan and Teresh, the 2 king's officers from the group charged at the gates who conspired to kill him. The king asked what honor or distinction was to be conferred upon Mordecai for this, and the king's servants answered, nothing was done for him The king then asked, "Who's that in the courtyard?" Who's that in the courtyard? For Haman had come into the outer courtyard of the king's palace to speak with the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. The king's servant told him, "Is Haman standing there in the courtyard?" The king said, "Have him come in." So Haman came in. The king said to him, "What should be done for the man that the king wants to honor?" Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king want to honor more than me?" Who does that sound like? Does it not sound like Donald Trump? Trump has a Haman spirit. Whom would the king want to honor more than me? So Haman answered the king, "For a man the king wants to honor, have royal robes brought, which the king himself wears, and the horse the king rides, and the royal crown on his head. The robes of the horses should be handed over to the one of the king's most respected officials, and they should be put robes on the man of the king wants to honor. Lead him on a horseback through the streets of the city, proclaiming him ahead. This is what is done for the man whom the king wants to order. Hurry! Take the robes and the horses, as you said, and do this for Mordecai." Don't leave out anything you mentioned. So Haman did this. Led him riding through the streets. This is what was done to the man whom the king wanted to order. Verse 13, after Haman had told Zeresh, his wife, everything that had happened to him, his advisor and his wife said to him, if Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is a Hebrew, you will not get the better of him. On the contrary, your downfall before him is certain. I'm going to speak prophetically.
Uh-oh, here we go.
I'm going to speak by permission.
Uh-oh.
This is October the 2nd. 2024. We are almost a month and some days before the November election of the Haman mentality. People will be voting for this gentleman to be president of the United States of America. I am going to go out on a limb early. Haman had a wife, Zeresh, and friends. She told him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is a Hebrew, you will not get the better of him. On the contrary, your downfall before him will be certain.
Who does that also sound like? There's another story that we read about a woman called Yehudit. And she goes, and there's this exchange about how do we get to these Hebrews that are up in the mountains. And one of the people from the nation goes to Harlophanes and he says, as long as the Most High is with these people, you will never win. You will never get to them. You are going to have to find a way to deter them from their Most High. That reminded me of that piece where you read that there, and it says, as long as the Most High is with these people, you are not going to win.
Chapter 7, verse 3. Verse 7. So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. I'm going to go to verse 3. Queen Esther, you will be granted it whatever you want up to half the king. And Esther the queen answered, if I have won your favor, and if it pleases the king, then whatever I ask is given to me is my own life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and exterminated. If we had only been sold as men and women slaves, I would have remained quiet. Since then, our trouble would not have been worth the damage it would have caused the king to alter the situation. King asked the queen, who is he? Where is the man who dared to do such a thing? Esther said, a ruthless enemy. It's this wicked Haman. Haman stood aghast, terrified before the king and the queen. In a rage, the king got up from the wine banquet and went out to the palace garden. But Haman remained, pleading with Esther, the queen, to spare his life. I'm going to prophesy again. I'm going to go on a limb.
Okay, here we go. You're going far out on that branch.
When the downfall of this existing administration that's trying to take control of America fails, this individual is falling upon a multiplicity of criminal charges and a new charge that was just brought today by a 168-page document that outlines the criminality that he did in trying to overturn the 2020 election.
For the January 6th.
January 6th. Okay?
Incursion, yeah.
When it fails, he is going to be pleading before the courts to spare his life, just as Haman is doing here between Esther. Haman remained pleading. Haman had just fallen on the couch where Esther was when the king returned from the palace garden to the wine banquet. He shouted, "Is he even going to rape the queen here in the palace before my very eyes?" The moment these words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harunah, one of the king's attendants, said, "Look, the gallows, 75 feet high."
Stop. Wait a minute. Hold on. Do you know how tall 75 feet is? My goodness. Most buildings are at least 35, 30. If you're in construction, OSHA over, I think, like 35 feet, you got to have the state of California come out and get a special permit for a building that's over 35 feet tall. So it's two buildings stacked on top of each other, plus some. The weight of that knife coming down from 75 feet. And you tell me he didn't, okay.
The gallows 75 feet high that Haman had made for Mordecai, who spoke only good for the king, is standing at Haman's house. The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger had subsided. Now,
dear friends,
I submit to you, first of all, we're inquiring how is it that Esther even is suggested to be connected with Sukkoth. Well, perhaps that 10th month in there in the text probably does. But then the other issue is that the glory and the joy that the Hebrew people had at realizing their freedom and that their demise was not going to happen is said to be paralleled with the joy that happens to happen at Sukkoth.
Okay.
And that's just what's been said. Now, I'm going to go out on another limb early, and I'm going to say to you, there is another Hebrew woman who don't know she's a Hebrew woman that may ascend into the house of the kingdom to rescue Hebrew Israel and the nations once again.
What does it say in Yeremiah, chapter number 39, 37, some in there? Is that we are to, while we're in exile, we are to pray for the prosperity
Of
the city upon which you live in.
right.
Because while you're in exile, you said it and we challenged you on it. I wish we would have had it at that time when we were talking about it. But you're right. Sticking to your guns, because it's not an easy thing to do while we're in exile, but while we're here, we need to pray for the prosperity, because this is the land upon which we live until the Most High says otherwise.
Now,
Whatever's going to make us prosperous.
I'm going to close this podcast with these words. If I am right,
P. Diddy and Trump gonna be in the same cell?
and she wins this election, I will be back on this microphone declaring that the Most High once again has saved his people in this exiled nation from the annihilation and the destruction of a man who has the same temperament as a Haman.
Okay. Okay. We're going to replay this whole part of this podcast. We're going to take snippets out of it and run it back. So, you going on record?
I'm going on record.
Okay, you going on record. All right. Okay.
And I'm going to say,
For the record.
these words of the three Hebrew boys.
Sure. Or four.
The three Hebrew boys.
Four, yeah.
Who responded to the king. We're not so
careful,
careful,
yeah.
King, as to how we're going to answer you.
Mm-hmm.
If the Most High chooses to deliver us, he will. If he doesn't, then he has a greater purpose.
What a beautiful position to be in.
This has been Moreh, Robert B. Holman Jr., and
Moreh, Shawn Appleton.
this has been
Hebrews in
Exile.
Shalom.